Hello, Demis Hellen here, and this is the SynthMaster One demo track called Symetric. The synths and the bass, as you'll have seen from the preset videos, are made with SynthMaster One, bar a couple of them, and then two of the pads are also using the SynthMaster One engine. So we've got the thin and light and the aura pad in there. So I'm going to let you listen to a few sections. I'll just skip through a few parts of it, and then you'll be able to listen to the full track in full from the audio download. That is Symetric, and this is the SynthMaster demo track. So let's have a look at how things are working, and we're going to focus on the SynthMaster tracks, of course. So on the synth section, we have 5 synth layers, and a fifth one here, which is not a SynthMaster track, but this has added some Atmos. So I'll let you have a listen to how they're working together and how they sound individually, and I'll just show you some of the inserts and the post-processing that I've done. So first we have Plucko, and this is a thinner, woodier / metallic. It's kind of in between, but this gives the kind of starting point for the synth layer builds. Then we add this one, which adds a little bit more texture into the sound, but again, it's still relatively thin in sound. But this is more of the 90s sound when you listen to this on its own. And that's the reason I've used that, to add a little bit of original classic trance in there. Then the square lead, this uses some pitch modulation, so really fast modulation to give you a nice transient click, and that starts to define the melody. And because it's a square, it stands out and sits on top of those saw waves quite well from the other two synths so far. Then we have a brighter synth, and this is the first of the two super saws. And then we have a darker synth that adds the lower tones back in, and is less defined as well. So the difference between these, and these are designed for layering these particular presets. This is a bright one, lots of attack, lots of transient detail in there, very defined super saw. This one is very thick, not defined, very smooth. And the reason that I do this is this layer here then starts to merge with the bass line a lot better because it's not as defined, and the bass can start taking over and providing some of that gritty detail. So if you listen to this with the bass, fits nicely with it. So all the synths together. They sound really nice together, built for layering. Now this one here is just adding atmosphere, so let's have a quick listen to how it sounds. As you can see, tons of delay and tons of reverb. Set the wet mix up to full on the individual channel, and then that gives you some nice background texture to work with. You can start adding saturation to it, you can start adding all other features and just process it how you want. So this one, I like to cut it off so it's nice and high, and it just provides that nice background atmosphere layer, like I was adding more reverb to the other channels. So let's have a listen to that without that track on, and then I'll add it in. It's more noticeable on the headphones. There's a little bit of atmosphere in the background. More notable is when it comes in here. So it almost sounds like a pad has just started to come in, but as you can see, the pads haven't even been introduced yet. So that's the sort of sound that I'm going for. Okay, so there's a lot of post-processing going on, especially on here. Saturation and EQ, and a little bit of compression on there to control individual peaks on those. And then really the magic happens here. So let's listen to this with it on, and then I'll turn it off on the second time round. So as you can hear, there is nice post-processing going on there. It sounds a little bit howly and a bit too mid-rangey here. Without them on, there's no definity in the sound itself. You can't hear the individual transients, but with this one, you start to hear those individual sounds. Now that's down to some compression to smooth out and blend the sound, so it's like a gluer to get all of those glued together in the synth bus. Then a little bit of sidechain. This is just a filter. Then some gain control after the processing there. And then it goes into an EQ, and that's where a lot of the magic happens. We're doing some mid removal there, and that is to leave the side detail in the synths in the bass area only. So you get that nice blend between your basses and synths. Instead of just cutting it out with a stereo high pass, just use a high pass but in mid, so it leaves the stereo detail, and then it blends a lot nicer together. And then on here, just a bit of a mid boost there. There was a problem frequency across all of the synths, so instead of adding an EQ and kind of treating each one, I've just treated them all and just used a little bit of the dynamic range feature there. And then it goes through a final compressor, and that's what gets you that sound. So that is the synth section there. Let's have a look at the basses. So let's move over to this section here where everything's kind of introduced. Let's go to this. Oh. Let's go to this bit here. Okay, so all the basses bar this one and this one here, sub bass, and this one from Spire. All the rest are SynthMaster. So let's have a look at the mid roller. So a bit of processing on there. Made it into a mid bass, just using some simple processing techniques there with some delay. And what is actually happening here is The synth preset has been set up to let the filter stay open, even though it's closed down, but I've given it a sharp kind of decay rate there on the mod envelope and let a lot more of that envelope influence the sound, so we're getting some of that tone and like texture of that sound through instead of it just being cut off. And that gives the kind of tone and the setting for the track. And that plays a key role with this one, which is the low roller. Now there is two lower basses in this track. There's this one, and then there's like a sub bass, and they both kind of play a different role in the track. So this is playing a 3-noted section. So if we just look in here, there we are. So we've got a rolling trance bass instead of just being an offbeat bass, and it just gives it a little bit more drive inside the track. Now there is a sub bass on this track here, but it looks like I've opened up a previous save of this. The sub bass takes over this section here, so I may have made a creative decision and not remembered, but there is a sub bass, but that preset is being given away as well. But what that's doing is adding the lower end, so them two together, especially with the kick drum in there, it gives you that nice drive and that push forward in the track. Okay, and then we move on to the mid-arc bass here. This is one of my favourites. So this one's got a very woody texture to it. So there's an element of metallic in there, but this one was shaped specifically to kind of fit with this one. Very similar, not high pitched, there's no really harsh frequencies in there. I want it to be quite soft, and this is where SynthMaster shows off its capabilities in creating those sounds. I like to keep things raw, and it just gives you that feeling that everything's a little bit more analog than what it actually is, because obviously we are digital synths, but it's got that great analog feel to it. And again, this one has got a tad of processing, so we've got a little bit of sidechain, bit of EQ, and some saturation there as well. We'll just get it over here for the bass mix, and I'll show you what's happening on this bass channel as well once we've looked at how these work together. So this one and this one work hand in hand. We're playing the same rhythm, but we're choosing different notes to accentuate. And then we have the low roller to give the drive. And then we introduce these two as an effect. We've got the electric zipper here. And then we've got the sub bass, which is just additional rolling for the first part. Okay, so if we just get rid of the non-SynthMaster basses and have these three playing, I'll show you what we're doing on this bass channel over here. So let's listen to it with the insets on, and then we'll turn them off. As you can hear, there's a lot more mid detail now after all this processing, and that is down to Axis, really, the multiband compressor. And what I'm doing in there, if I just open that up for you, in the lower end, in the imaging section, we're just removing the stereo detail. So you don't have to do it in a multiband compressor. However, this is stereo spread to -100, so it's just literally all mid detail, and it helps focus that low end. You can do this on an EQ. I tend to use FabFilter for that, to get that kind of low end on there as well. But I wanted to add some expansion that particular plugin offers. So let's listen to that without Axis on again. Tons of stereo detail in the low end, and it makes it less punchy. It's much more defined with that on. And also the saturation is giving that a lot of character as well. So it's helping to shave off that top detail. And as you can see, we've got it set to 37 as the roll off, and then we've just attenuated the tone there. So when we turn that off, it becomes a little bit more clear, and we're going for that really cut off feel. So that is how they are working. Then we've just got a bit of EQ again and some limiting there to finish it off. And that is the bases for that track. Then we have the pads. So let's focus on this section here. Thin Light and Aura pad work together really nicely. These are the two SynthMaster tracks. So we've got one raw super saw and with a little bit of reverb, and then we've got a really thin one with lots of resonance in there to give it a little bit different texture in there. And then if we add everything in, the other two presets from other synths are adding the lower end in, whereas the SynthMaster ones are focusing on the top power, because I think SynthMaster sounds really good on the mid-range stuff, especially for the pads. Pleasantly surprised with how good that sounds once it's all there. If we take these two away, there is no detail there, and it was specifically designed like that, but that just adds the final cherry on the top to give that really nice sparkly sound. And those pads are throughout the track, as you can see here. We take away the lower detail there, but we keep the two SynthMaster tracks in, and the Thin and Light pad and the Aura pad do provide that textural detail at the start of the track as well. And again at the end. Okay, and let's have a look at how the pads were processed. So a little bit of individual processing, not too much, just some EQ. And then on the pads here, we have some compression, some sidechain, a filter there, and then some final compression to boost up the entire sound. So let's just have a quick listen to them and turn off the inserts halfway through. So you can hear that this is controlling the sound quite a lot in terms of compression, and that is due to the first one gluing it together, and then we have some sidechain, so that lowers the volume again because we've got that kind of pump effect going through, even though it's quite minimal at this point. And then the fat filter is what's filtering that in, and then the last compressor is adding that volume back in, but not to the level it was at before, and that gives you that nice technical detail there to keep that piano floating on the top. And then finally, we'll just look, there's no SynthMaster plugins here, but let's look at the percussion. So just a quick insight here, we've got two claps layered up to get that nice transient snap. 3 loops layered on top of each other from different packs, and then a variety of effects kind of sweeping in and out. And then once the main section's done, we introduce this section here, which is using some filter sweeps. Again. So just subtle differences there, and then we have like a synth loop here. And then all in all, with the kick drum, and then all the sounds together. And let's have a quick look at the percussion processing there. Bit of sidechain, and then a bit of percolate, which is from Soundspot, and this one just enhances the sounds of the plugins. So that concludes this video. I hope you found this useful in walking through and seeing how the SynthMaster tracks have been layered up so you can hear every little detail and hear how it's been made, layered, processed, and how the actual presets are made in the individual preset videos. So if you haven't seen those, you can go and find those and get the presets on the online library. So I've been Demis Hellen, and thank you very much for watching this SynthMaster One tutorial.